breakfast.
Oh, good morning, and welcome to Comics for Breakfast. I'm your host in the squeaky chair, JASON MINK. Thank you for joining me this morning. Today we're going to pull 3 books from the Old Guys Who Like Old Comics archives. We're going to crack them open. We're going to take a look and see just what it is that makes those comics special. But hey, enough of my yakking and yawn. Let's get right to it. The year was 1967, and Marvel Comics staffers Roy Thomas and Gary Friedrich had an idea for a new title. Drawing inspiration from the classic Mad Magazine comic parodies of yesteryear, the two pitched the idea of a contemporary comic spoofing their distinguished competition to publisher and editor-in-chief Stan Lee. Lee liked the idea, but felt that the book's focus should be instead on Marvel's own characters. Lee understood that if Marvel beat his competitors to the punch, it would take a lot of the sting out of their satire, not to mention it was a great marketing opportunity. Marvel's attempts at humor titles in the Silver Age were hit or miss, and the chance to get their cut, however small, of the comedy pie was just too great to resist. Stan gave the project the go-ahead, and Not Brand Ech was born. The first issue, cover dated May of 1967, featured send-ups of Marvel's first family, here known as the Fantastical Four, in addition to the first appearance of Marvel's latest long underwear creation, Four Bushman. By issue 2, the book was already reaching outside of the Marvel Universe for inspiration, and sharp-eyed readers would see homages to Archie, Tower Comics, as well as DC, and comic strips like Peanuts, Little Orphan Annie, or Dennis the Menace. Today our focus is on issue 3, which is the earliest issue I have. It's an especially solid outing, as it's an all-origin issue featuring Charlie America, the Inedible Bulk, and the Mighty Soar, featuring work from Roy Thomas and Tom Sutton, Gary Friedrich and Marie Severin, and Marvel Titans Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Stan and Jack start off the proceedings with Jazzguardian half-brothers Mighty Soar and Hokey. The duo's classic sibling rivalry is cemented from the start, but here it's played for yucks instead of drama. With that established, it's straight to Midgard, specifically Norway, where Dr. Darn Bloke is making the best of his crummy vacation. The dock takes a tumble, and before you can say Deus Ex Machina, Bloke has been replaced with the brawny buffoon, the Mighty Soar. It's pretty impressive how easy Lee and Kirby are able to switch gears, but I guess, to them, this stuff was always pretty funny. Yolnir, the enchanted mallet, is swapped out for a claw hammer, which our oafish hero immediately breaks. He hies off to Jazzguard, but is rebuked by the ocularly challenged guardian of the rain-soaked bridge, Gumball, who resembles certain members of our own OG Pantheon more than a little bit. Soar manages to get past Gumball, but finds Jazzguard overrun with tourists. Hey, a god's gotta eat, Mr. Leahy. The reader is treated to a cornucopia of late 1960s celebrities. Pause the video and see if you can name them all. Next up, we encounter the Big Daddy himself, Schmoden, berating a malformed manservant. But before Schmoden can unleash his wrath, Mighty Soar annihilates the nuisance. Instead of ingratiating himself to his father, Schmoden is put off by his dim-witted kid's behavior. Old One-Eye decides enough is enough and splits Jazzguard for the sunnier climes of Earth, where he takes up with a certain nurse who can frug like nobody's business. See, if the Marvel Cinematic Universe were more like this, I might still be on board. Our next tantalizing tale features everyone's favorite mean green, the Inedible Bulk. No, I'm not talking about your wife's kale salad. I'm talking about Marvel's most misunderstood misanthrope. As our story begins, we find our hedge-hewn hero on a rampage in the middle of the city. Bulk just wants to be left alone, but can't catch a break. The poor guy can't even get his favorite ice cream bar. Dogged by the army, Bulk gets angry, and when Bulk gets angry, he ruminates. We're treated to a flashback introducing Brucey Banter, top scientist at the sanitation department. Banter has been tasked with finding the solution to air pollution, but he can't get any science done with the boss's ditzy daughter Bitsy slobbering all over him. Even worse, his boss is Bitsy's daddy, Thunderdolt Ross, who's taken a personal dislike to Chowderhead Banter. Driven mad by his boss and desperate to escape the affections of Bitsy, Banter heads off to the dump with an armful of experimental chemicals. There he encounters Slick Jones, car thief and terrible music aficionado. Flying into a rage, Banter attacks Jones, but at that moment the chemicals explode, and Banter is caught in the blast. The effects are immediate, with the sanitation scientist losing his sense of smell and then his clothing. Now bulked up, Banter wrecks Thunderdolt's dump, but the change is temporary. Reverting back to Banter, he finds himself just as harangued and henpecked as before, only now he's an outcast to boot. But old Slick Jones hasn't forgotten about his big green buddy, getting him work in showbiz. Okay, he's not starring opposite of Liz Taylor or getting a guest spot on Laugh-In, but hey, a job's a job. In the final story, we're treated to the origin of Charlie America. Speedy Rogers is doing his best to duck the draft, but the feds, in the form of famous newspaper comic characters the Peanuts and Dick Tracy, are wise to his scam. Speedy tries to make time with local orphan Little Awful Angie, but is rejected and carted off by the feds. 3 bracks, 2 zonks, and an assortment of other pinball noises later, and Shrimpy Speedy has been transformed into side of USDA beef Charlie America. But all is not well. It seems the Nazis have infiltrated the super soldier serum program and are out to kill Charlie before he can hit the front lines. Unluckily for them, Charlie is a grade A coward, which makes killing him harder than expected. With his attempts at self-preservation misconstrued as heroism, Charlie is thrown into action against the Nazi menace. The next few pages don't stray far from Cap's actual origin, hitting on key points like Bunky Barnes, Baron Zero, and eventually Charlie's resurrection by the Revengers. But not all is as it seems in the upside-down world of Not Brand Ech, and we're thrown another curveball, one I certainly didn't see coming. All in all, this issue is a lot of fun. However, some of the humor here may elude modern audience members. References to the Red Baron or Joe Besser's infamous Stinky character from the Abbott and Costello TV show will generate hilarity in some and puzzlement in others. That said, the art here alone is enough to carry the day, even if you don't get all the corn packed into the strips. The entire run of Not Brand Ech has been reprinted recently, so there's never been a better time to get caught up. Next up, it's a parody of the infamous radio and comic hero The Shadow from Mad Number 4, cover dated May-June of 1953. Now, my copy is from the nostalgic Mad reprint from '74. As much as I love those early Mads, they're way beyond my price range. This little gem is by legendary American comics creator and artist Will Elder. Elder's skewed sense of humor and ability to mimic his fellow artists' styles made him a perfect fit for the fledgling Mad magazine. From the very first issue, readers were treated to his irreverent and satirical take on both the mundane and the extraordinary, as well as his everything and the kitchen sink approach to storytelling. Soon to be known as Chicken Fat, Elder peppered his strips with countless side jokes and background gags, creating an immersive and eminently rereadable experience. Our story begins in a grimy, rundown dive, populated by a who's who of criminal archetypes. Margot, sexy sidekick of the Shadow, comes in looking for her boss and attracts the ire of the mob. However, the hero is actually in their very midst. He makes the mistake of calling attention to himself, which seems effective in the comics, but really just lets people know where you are. Case in point. Shad gets mad and demands his opponent play fair, then promptly shoots him in the back. Ah, yes. Remember when violence was all in good fun? What the hell happened? There was a time when you could drop an anvil or paint a fake train entrance on a wall, and there wasn't a court in the land that would convict you. We really lost a lot. Anyway, back to the mayhem. Shadow does his thing, all of the criminals shoot each other, and it looks like it's case closed. Only the reality is, in spite of her devotion, Lamont and Margot's relationship is complicated. At first, it manifests in little things, like giving Margot a boot in her ample rump and sending her head first down the stairs, but soon things grow more heated. Tired of her nearly revealing his identity and generally making a nuisance of herself, the Shadow steps up his game with increasingly desperate efforts to rid himself of his persistent partner. He feeds her food from cafe bacteria. It's a hilarious sequence chock full of the aforementioned chicken fat. In fact, it's easy to lose sight of the story for all that's going on in the panels. That's not to slight the writing, but you'd be forgiven for glossing over the words and just drinking in the art. Elder is having a blast here, delivering a demented take on love and infatuation that wouldn't be rivaled until decades later with the Joker and his mole, Harley Quinn. In fact, you can almost see an embryonic Harley here, but maybe I'm just reaching. Lured to a spooky house on the hill, the Shadow finally manages to dispatch the hapless Margot, and he ends his tale alone, cackling to himself, as the Shadow so often does. And finally, we turn our attention to DC Comics Showcase Volume 1, number 62, cover dated May of 1966. Now, here's my copy, but it doesn't have a cover, so we're going to use this one as our example. Now, as a comics fan yourself, I needn't tell you that 66 was the height of Batmania. The white heat generated by the ABC TV show was a ratings bonanza and merchandising phenomena that gave DC a nice tailwind against their competitor, the up-and-coming Marvel Comics. With any success, there is always the temptation to dissect, to isolate the elements that make a thing popular, and then replicate that success in equal measure with a new product. Seemingly noting the popularity of the camp aspect of the Batman show, DC moved to capitalize on their latest gains by creating a quirky new property that might draw a little bit of that Batmania goodwill its way. After all, if 2 campy superheroes were popular, how would 5 do? The concept of an inferior team began with Jack Miller, but was handed over to writer E. Nelson Bridwell, who developed the concept, and Joe Orlando, who created the visuals. Bridwell, hired by DC the year before, had primarily been an editor on the Superman family of books. The writer dipped into his own pool of concepts he'd been developing as a lifelong fan of the comics medium and, with artist Joe Orlando, brought Inferior 5 to newsstands and spinner racks across the country. There's a mad scientist loose in Megaopolis, but the city is woefully unprepared. There hasn't been an incident of supervillainy in 20 years, thanks to the heroic team of the Freedom Brigade finally defeating the dread Dr. Evil. No, not that one. Or that one. Look, it's a common name, all right? Anyway, the chief of police decides to contact the team to help in spite of their 20-year absence. Cut to a young Myron Victor having his Pet Sounds moment, all packed up and ready to split for the city. But he's stopped at the door, not by Mom and Pop, but by all but forgotten heroes Patriot and Lady Liberty. Good news! He doesn't have to go and work at some mundane job. There's superheroing to be done. Myron's protests that he's not a hero like his parents fall on deaf ears. Mom and Dad have no idea that their son's years of training have produced a complete washout. They still have high expectations of him, and with a lineage consisting of Zorro, the Lone Ranger, and some kind of flying Batman, who can blame them? But our young hero won't be forced to go it alone. The children of all of his parents' teammates are ready to take up the baton, and all they need is a leader. Myron immediately knuckles under, always a good characteristic when attempting to lead a group of people. He heads into the city, commissions a costume befitting a hero of his stature, and then heads off to meet his teammates. There's Airhead Dumb Bunny, super strong daughter of Wonder Woman analog Princess Power, along with the oafish Awkward Man, son of Mr. Might and the Mermaid. Slowly taking up the rear is Captain Swift's super-speed suppressed son the Blimp and cowardly bowman White Feather. And because there's nothing like unity to empower a group, the team adopt the moniker of the Inferior Five. Nicely done. At the same time across town, Dr. Gregory Gruesome is in the process of building a super laser death beam. Unfortunately for him, he lacks the ruby needed to complete the device. With the help of his flunky Hermes, the doc assembles a robot out of trash and sends it off for the ruby. Meanwhile, the I-5 are investigating Hermes' previous crime when they encounter the doctor's robot. After a bit of back and forth and some misunderstanding, the team manages to overcome their inexperience and, through teamwork and dumb luck, defeat the machine. Watching from afar, Dr. Gruesome decides to dispatch his new foes using his deadly crime car. Joe Orlando really delivers when it comes to this over-the-top contraption, giving the crime car a wacky races meets Death Race 2000 aesthetic you just have to see to believe. Imagine driving one of these babies down the crowded city streets. In the end, the team not only manages to survive the deadly vehicle attack, but the I-5 rout the Doctor's nefarious plans as well. Beaten but not defeated, Gruesome flees back to his lair. Hermes gets the best line in the book, and the story ends with the Inferior Five winning the day. More or less. Inferior Five #1 is a light but lively read. Sure, a lot of the jokes are groan-worthy, but Bridwell's commitment to the concept carries the issue. In spite of the team's gross incompetence, the writer is never abusive or treats them as objects of derision. There's a gentleness here that's obviously a little refreshing. The art by Joe Orlando and Mike Esposito makes for an appealing package. Fun is had with traditional concepts like page layouts and panel borders, often being disregarded to provide room for composition. In the end, it's an interesting concept, the idea of a team that deliberately downplays its strengths and plays up its weaknesses deserves further exploration. If there's one thing we've seen in the past few years, it's that audiences love to have their expectations subverted. I'm Jason Mink. If you enjoyed this program, please consider supporting us by purchasing a shirt, a mug, or a mask at our link below. Let's keep this old train a-rolling. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week at breakfast.